Welcome to week 3 of our Introduction to Medical Software class, and in this week's lectures we will look at the clinical environment and the constraints that come with it. So both constraints that come from the environment itself, the doctors, the nurses, whoever, all the stakeholders are involved, and also the associated technology that is present there, the databases that we have to interact with, the electronic health records, the PACS, the imaging databases, and then issues to do with the regulations that are in this area, the data privacy and security issues, and the increasing emphasis on cybersecurity. So those are our topics for today. So this is what we'll cover. We'll talk about health environment software, what we need to interface with, data privacy laws and regulations, and as I mentioned before, cybersecurity. We have 6 segments here. First, we'll talk about the stakeholders. So I labeled these patients, doctors, and all the rest of them are involved. We'll talk about clinical information technology in 2 segments. The first one is the general introduction. The second one will focus in on medical imaging. We'll have a demo presentation of the imaging and the health records databases from Professor Miriam Aibon, a radiologist at Yale New Haven Hospital. And then the last 2 segments will talk about data privacy and cybersecurity. And in just like every week, the presentation here is based on the textbook, and here we're looking at material from chapter 3 of the textbook as we go. So segment 1, patient, doctors, and who else is involved in this complicated process called the healthcare system. So in the past couple of lectures, we have talked extensively about the regulatory environment. Here we'll talk about the environment which your software will operate in. Who are the users? Who are the buyers? What will you have to interface with? And that's an important, I'll underline that and we'll come back to this. And there are other laws and regulations, especially regarding data privacy and security. There's HIPAA in the United States, and this is medical specific. And there's GDPR in the European Union, and this covers all forms of data, of which medical setup is just but one example. The example I like to always use for my students as they think about this is this concept of that no man is an island. This comes from a poem from John Donne from about 400 years ago. And the poem begins with the words, "No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main." So when you think about medical software, take this poem and transpose it a little bit and make it sound like no medical software is an island entire of itself. Every piece of software is a piece of a workflow, a part of the main system. So tongue-in-cheek, that gives you the picture of what we're talking about. Your software is not going to run the entire process. You have to go back and forth with others. So let's just look at this. Our software is likely to be part of a workflow. So this graphic up on the top left, this purple box is your software, but the user uses something else before, and they may well use something else after. So keep that in mind. You're not controlling the whole process. It's very rare. We must understand what comes before and what comes after it. What bridges do we need to build? Are we connecting databases? Are we connecting to hardware? What standards do we have to follow? These are communication standards. They're the most common, HL7 for health records, DICOM for images. And what other constraints come into play? What data privacy, security, cybersecurity, and other regulations do we need to worry about? So when you enter this business, when you start a new project in the medical world, what you want to do is to understand the lay of the land. What comes before you? What comes after you? Where is the data coming from? Where is the data going? Who is providing the data? Who is consuming the data? What format is this data coming in? All of those things are almost the first step in designing any piece of medical software. You have to map the world, figure out where you are in that world, and just work around those constraints. So let's talk a little bit about the healthcare system, and we're going to give a little bit more of a basic description of this, but similar to what Dr. Nikolai presented in week 1. The US healthcare system is complex and often hard to understand, even for those people who are working in it for many years. Part of the issues are historical. So beginning in the 1930s, healthcare benefits were and are, for the most part, primarily provided as part of employee benefits. So typically the employer covers some of the cost of health insurance policies, and this varies from employer to employer. So there are 3 major components already here. There are the patients, the healthcare delivery organizations, doctors, hospitals, etc., and then there are the payers, the insurance companies. So this sets up an interesting triangle. The patients pay the insurance companies, who pay the hospitals to provide healthcare to the patient. So you don't have this direct exchange of fee for service. This is an indirect system, and this causes all kinds of complications. There are other parts of the healthcare system. You have insurance provided by government agencies, such as Medicare and Medicare, and you see the picture from Medicare.gov in the corner. Individuals may also purchase insurance directly from companies. There's a webpage called healthcare.gov. The setting up of this webpage caused major software issues, and we're going to discuss that at the end of this course in one of the student presentations. And finally, we have the Veterans Administration, the so-called VA system that has its own hospitals, and this is the closest the United States comes to having a single-payer health system. This is for people who have served in the military. Other countries have their own complexities, and you may need to interact with them as well. So we may have government-subsidized mandatory health insurance policies, the case in Germany, and this dates probably to the oldest piece of welfare legislation, Bismarck's Health Insurance Act of 1883. We have single-payer systems as the UK and Canada, where the government is responsible for all payments out of tax money, of course. And then we have combinations such as public, free, plus private at a price in countries like India, Singapore, my native Cyprus, and many other countries. So all of these are important because you need to understand who's paying for your software and whose needs do you need to meet. So keep those things in mind as we move forward. What are the stakeholders involved in the healthcare system? And this is from a report from ANSI. You can see the title below. Of course, we have points of care. We have hospitals, long-term care facilities, assisted living, and anybody else who provides care to patients. We have payers, insurers, Medicare, Medicaid, employee benefits, and all those people come into play. We have clinical support, things like clinical labs, imaging companies, pharmacies. We have business associates, people who do benefits managing, administrators, payment agencies. We have IT services, people who do data storage, people who do web portals, support mobile access. And there are all kinds of other people playing in here. There's insurance companies, law firms for malpractice purposes, contract research organizations. And all of this complicated list of people comes into the picture. So your client, your user may be in one of all of those things. So you're doing medical software, but you may be working for customers or primarily law firms that need to evaluate claims of malpractice. That could be one example. So keep this more expansive view of medical software in mind. Most people think that this software is going to be used by doctors and nurses, but the reality is a lot more complicated than that. And this leads to the fundamental question of who is my customer? So you need to identify the needs of the user. This is the start of the medical software lifecycle. But some products, your user, the payer, might be the insurance companies. Anything that reduces the cost of care will appeal to insurance companies. Others may appeal to hospitals, anything that improves the efficiency of care, so we can see more patients in a finite amount of time. And others may appeal to the patients directly. It makes life easier, it lets you schedule appointments, it lets you get your results. So the customer varies. Who is interested in the software will vary depending on what you're doing. And to conclude this segment, we have this quote. I'm paraphrasing from Dr. Kirashi. You'll hear from her in week 12. But, this is a comment that she makes many times. The end user of our software, whether it's a doctor, a nurse, or a patient, is often not the customer who purchases the product. This dichotomy between the buyer of a potential piece of software and the main users of a particular software make the design of software even more challenging. And so the problem here is, and we're going to hear more about this in week 12, the problem here fundamentally is this. The user of your software may be a doctor, but the person who will pay for the software is the insurance agency. So you have to satisfy the needs of the doctor. It has to be easy to use. It has to let her do what she needs to do. But if the insurance agency is paying for it, you also have to demonstrate that this particular piece of software is going to reduce the cost of medical care. As an example, there may be other situations like that. So with that, we conclude this introduction to the healthcare system. We'll discuss clinical information technology in the next couple of segments. Thank you.